Welcome, everybody, to another edition of Keep the Line Moving, the podcast designed to talk about leadership, life, and inspiration. I am your host, Chris Gargano, and today's topic is servant leadership. What does it mean to care for your people, to show humility, lead by example, authenticity, vulnerability? We dissect all of that and more during this week's conversation. And who is it with? It is retired Lieutenant Colonel Oakland McCulloch. He spent 40 plus years in leadership throughout the military and civilian positions. He also wrote a book in 2021 called Your Leadership Legacy, Becoming the Leader You Were Meant to Be. Let that sink in for a moment. That is what we talk about. Thinking about the end in mind and then reversing back and working towards your legacy. This conversation is for emerging leaders or anyone in a position caring for people. The conversation begins now with Oak McCulloch. You and I have a passion for leadership, but this is not about me. This is about you. But that passion for leadership comes out of your pores when you talk. You know, I've obviously done a lot of research on you. When did this begin in your life? When you look back, when did that leadership, love of helping people, servant leadership, which we'll get to, when did it begin in your life?
So I think it started at a young age. I was the oldest of four boys. So I was always in that kind of leadership role. And my father kind of pushed that on me that, you know, if something went wrong in the house when he wasn't there with the other kids, it was my fault. Whether I did it or not, I should have stopped them from doing it. So it kind of started there. And then I was captain of my sports team in high school. And that's where I really started to enjoy being a leader and really, I think, started to understand that being the leader isn't about you. It's about the team and it's about other people. And then, of course, I had some great leaders in the Army who have turned out to be mentors of mine, who retired 2, 3, 4-star generals, who really put the servant leadership part in it for me.
So you would think, so if somebody casually is coming across this podcast and they see, you know, your big title, right? Retired Lieutenant Colonel in the Army, they're thinking, you know, in traditional ways, most likely, right? That hierarchical, you know, 25 push-ups and then run and, you know, cleaning the latrine and those traditional ways of how it is depicted. But what you're saying, the generals had a leadership style of servant leadership. Explain that further if you could.
Yeah, so I mean, certainly the Army has its share of authoritarian micromanaging, do as I tell you to do. We have more than our share of those, and unfortunately, and we've all worked for that person, right? And none of us want to work for that person ever again because it's not fun. But you know, I had a boss who retired a 4-star general, and when I first started working with him, he was a lieutenant colonel and I was a lieutenant. And he told me one day, he said, "Oak, leadership is on a scale. And on this end of the scale, you got that authoritarian, micromanaging, do as I tell you to do guy." He said, and very little gets done other than exactly what he tells people to do. He said, and then on this end of the scale, you have chaos and Attila the Hun. And he said, and you want to be as close to chaos as you can be, as you feel comfortable. He said, because that's where creativity happens. That's where you're using other people's talents, other people's skills, other people's knowledge. And that's where people do things because they know that it's the right thing to do and they're taking their own initiative. He said, and the way to get there is first you got to develop the culture in your organization. Then you have to train people. Then you got to give them the resources that they need to accomplish whatever it is you're asking them to do. You empower them so that they have the authority to make it happen. And then you get out of their way and let them do it. And that's the guy that I always took after. And that's the method that I kind of took under, or I was under his wing. And I kind of took that as my philosophy of leadership. I want to get out of your way. I want to give you what you have to do it and then get out of your way. That doesn't mean you wash your hands of it. You're still responsible. So, you know, I was always there to, if somebody had questions or if they had concerns or if they wanted advice, I was there. But I didn't tell people how to do things.
That's really interesting. And the visual that I have there, if it were a scale, you're talking about on the far left, let's just say the way you just depicted that learning from that colonel, was on the far left is, harmonious, yet there's not enough angst to get things done, right? And then on the far right, you depicted it right close to the edge of chaos, which means creativity, innovation, things flourish that way with some, possibly constructive criticism and healthy conflict, things of that
Sure.
nature. That is what I'm hearing from you. Is that
Yeah.
accurate?
Yeah, absolutely. And you hit it right on the head. No matter what you got to do, no matter what you're doing, you should always have that reflection piece. So afterwards, whether it's a big event or everyday things, you should reflect back on how it went well, what didn't go so well. And even if something went well, you can still figure out a way to do it better. I don't care what it was. I had a friend who was the head football coach at Princeton University, and then here at Stetson University. Now he's the president of a university, and he always said, whether failure or success, your reaction should be the same. It should be to reflect on what happened and how to get better at it.
So, okay, so we're unpacking a lot here, but before we do that, I want to talk about that, because that's remaining calm and having a high emotional intelligence, and being, that it's the EQ that is so paramount in leadership. But let's back up a little bit. Tell everybody about your military history, your senior leadership positions, and then where you are now. And then let's get in your book here, because I love the title of this book, Your Leadership Legacy: Becoming the Leader You Were Meant to Be. There's so much to unpack here, but start with you. Let's get folks, we jumped right into all the leadership concepts, and I love that. But let's get folks caught up to who you are and what you have become in your life right now.
Yeah, so I did 23 years in the Army. I started my career as an infantry officer. I did my first 5 years in that branch, and then I switched over to Armor Cav, and I rode around on M1 tanks and did a bunch of teaching and operational things. I was in the first Gulf War, 1990. I was in Bosnia. I was in Kosovo. My last duty assignment on active duty, I ran an Army ROTC program where I was helping to produce the next generation of leaders for the Army. And then when I retired in 2009 from the Army, I ran the day-to-day operations of a food bank there in Mobile, Alabama, for almost 2 years. And it covered 52 counties in 3 states, Mississippi, Alabama, and the Panhandle of Florida. And I took over that job about a month and a half before the BP oil spill. So I was a little bit busy during those 2 years. And then they offered me to come here and be a government service officer and do recruiting for Army ROTC. So I got back into the ROTC piece, working for the government, not a soldier, but working for the government as a civilian. And I've done that since January 2011, and I get ready to retire here. My last day of work is tomorrow. So at that point, I'm going to write my second book, and I'm going to just concentrate on speaking engagements.
Is it bittersweet, Oak, to leave the military for the second time, or how are you feeling about it?
I'm ready. I'm ready to move on and do what I just turned 60 this year, so I'm ready to do what I want to do. And at this point in my life, it really is my passion to talk to as many people as I can about what it means to be a servant leader and to do it right.
Wonderful. And I thank you so much for explaining that. And now folks have context who don't know you, because you're out there a lot. You have a nice social media following, so people do know you. This is not somebody who's just coming on this podcast that isn't known and associated with a leadership legacy message. What is that message, Oak? This is fascinating. Leadership legacy, in the work that I do in consulting and coaching, I talk about that all the time. It's like, think about the end, right? Where are you going, right? How are you going to get there? What do you want to stand for?
Right.
But I want to hear it in your terms. Leadership legacy, putting those two words together is magical, in my opinion. But I'd like you to describe what your book is, the core and the essence of it, if you could.
Yeah, so I'm a firm believer, like we mentioned earlier, in servant leadership. And I tell people, look, your legacy has 2 parts. It is part what you accomplished, a very small part, because results do matter, at least in the real world. Maybe in fantasy land they don't, but in the real world, results do matter. So a small part of your legacy is what you actually accomplished. The bigger part of your legacy, in my opinion, is that next generation of leaders that you helped create, that's going to step up and take over when you're done. And then that next generation that they create, I had a guy who worked for me, and I say he worked for me. He was probably a better leader than I was, Master Sergeant David Powell. And he worked for me when we were running the ROTC program at the University of South Alabama. And one day we were talking about the importance of what we were doing, creating that next generation of leaders for the Army and for the nation. And he said, sir, great leadership handed down from generation to generation is what develops great nations. And I thought, wow, what a powerful quote. And the most powerful part of that quote is this. You can take that word nations and you can substitute anything you want for it. Family, company, sports team, food bank, hospital, doesn't matter, because every organization needs good leadership.
And that is fascinating in so many ways. So you're having that conversation with somebody you respect, and some in that story that you just told, you showed humility, saying that this guy reported to you, yet you thought he was perhaps a better leader than you were. So there's a lot to unpack. But here's what I love about that. You're analyzing real-time leadership, how you two are impacting those that were in your charge, right?
Right.
Do you think that in your speaking and coaching and your experience as a military leader, that folks do that enough? Evaluate, how are we showing up on a Tuesday?
No.
How are we showing up on a Friday? Describe why that is important.
Because they've forgotten that it's not about them. That's why there's a problem. It's gotten to the point where, and that's why you get micromanagers, because they're so afraid that somebody's going to make a mistake that's going to affect their next promotion or their next pay raise, that they micromanage people to the point where nothing gets done or only very little gets done. Nobody using any personal initiative. And I always tell people when they tell me that that's why they do it, I say, you're missing the big picture. If you empower those people to do things, you're making them better, which then makes the organization better, which in the end, you're going to get your pay raise and you're going to get your promotion, but you get it for the right reasons, not because you're selfish, but because you're helping people be better people and better employees. So I think we are missing that in leadership today, in all professions at all levels. I'm talking about government, military, business, you name it. I think we have a bunch of people who have forgotten that it's not about them. It's about the people that they and the organizations that they have the privilege to lead.
Well said. Is it, Oak, in your opinion, an illusion of control? Now, in the military, back again to the stereotypes, right? You have the controlling leader at the front saying, do this, do that, and not providing the why, right? And the why, there's a lot of people out there thinking, oh, the why is this, the why. No, the why is important. Now, if you're running up a hill, that's obvious. If there's somebody chasing you and they're telling you to do this, that's obvious. But why certain things occur when there's strategic decisions being made, whether in business or the military, let's get back to the illusion of control. Do you think that some leaders think, I can't do these things, meaning like assess how I'm doing, provide the why, or fill in the blank, whatever that leadership mechanism is to be great in our minds, right? The people that are trying to understand this and live this for a living. But talk about control and why I keep saying it's an illusion, because you can't control people and you can't control outcomes, in my opinion.
I agree 100%. It is an illusion. Control is absolutely an illusion. You don't become a great leader, or you don't make your leadership better by keeping control of everything. You get better and you become a better leader, and your people become better as you give that power away, that authority. You can give away all the authority you want, and you should give away as much as you possibly can to people. You can't ever give away responsibility. In the end, that's your name is on the blame line. You're the one that's responsible for everything that does or doesn't happen in your organization. I got that. But trying to keep control of an organization, it is a waste of time. And you have to tell them the why, especially this next generation coming up. When you and I were young, I never asked anybody why. I just did what I was told. This generation wants to know why. And I have found out, and there's nothing wrong with that. It just took me a couple of years to figure that out. But what I have found out is that when you provide the why, not just the how we're going to get there and all that, but the why, if you can explain the why and make them understand it, now you got them. Now they're willing to do whatever you're asking them to do.
You know what's really encouraging about what you just said, and a theme throughout this podcast that I've been fortunate to have hosted since January, is that is consistent. And the leaders that I've had on consistently say that the why is important, listening is important, empowering is important. That people are getting it. People are getting it, and I think
I
there
think
is
we're
a shift.
starting to. I think I'm seeing a shift.
I agree. And I don't know why, and it doesn't matter why right now, right? As long as we keep doing what our part in educating and helping people just see things differently, providing perspectives. All right, let's go back to what you talk about on a regular basis. You've been on 130 podcasts in 17 countries. You're doing a lot of talking about this. Back to servant leadership, humility, leading by example, and then the third one I'm going to bring up, which is vulnerability. Give me your analysis on the strength of invulnerability.
Well, you have to be willing to say that I made a mistake or that there's a better way to do it. There's two things that I have tried to do in my entire career as a leader. Number one is I always give credit where credit's due. So if my organization I'm in charge of does something great, I go to my boss in public, in front of my people and whoever else I can, and I say, hey, boss, look what my guys and gals did. And Joe, John, and Jane, they did a great job. If we didn't accomplish it, then I go in front of my boss in public, certainly in front of my people, and I say, hey, boss, I messed up, and this is how we're going to fix it. Because even if I wasn't the one who messed it up, I'm responsible. I'm the leader. I take responsibility. So I think you have to do that. That allows that to happen. And then I think the other piece of it is that you have to be honest with the people that you have the privilege to lead, because you're going to make a mistake. There is no perfect people in this world. I'm just here to tell you, and I had a boss who used to tell me, oh, if you didn't make a mistake today, you probably didn't do anything. And I don't care if you made a mistake. What I care about is, what did you do after you made the mistake? Did you try to sweep it under the rug? Did you blame somebody else? Or do you take responsibility and say, I messed up and this is how we're going to fix it? If you make mistakes, which we're all going to do, I think the people that you're leading understand that we're human, and they can accept that you made a mistake as long as you take responsibility for it. It's when you try to hide it or you try to blame somebody else, that's when your credibility, the trust is gone. And once that's gone, it's over. It's over.
So you were training to develop more leaders when you were leading in the military. Accurate? Yes, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
You now work with companies, schools, entities, right? Where you're doing the same thing, except with people that you don't see every day, right? So you're coming in for 3 or 4 days, 3 or 4 hours sometimes. What do you do when someone simply doesn't get that? You have a group of 11 people, maybe senior leaders at a company, and you're doing a workshop. 10 get it, and this one outlier is just constantly coming in with, well, what if, I don't see it that way. How do you approach that individual to get he or she to understand the virtues of this, but then allowing them to have an alternate point of view?
Yeah. So I think, everybody looks at, one of the first things I do is say, you have to define what leadership is for you, because how I define it may not work for you. That may not be what you believe leadership is. And there are certainly, even inside servant leadership, there's different ways that you can do that. So you got to figure that piece out for yourself. And I always make sure people understand that what worked for me may not work for you, and what worked for you may not work for me. I'm just giving you some examples of what did work. And if you can incorporate those into your leadership style, then, and your organization, then good for you. But I think the key, the way I always try to get people to understand, is by using personal examples. There's no talk of theory when I talk, I don't talk about theory whatsoever. I know leadership theory. Theory, in my opinion, is pretty worthless. I mean, that's not what makes you a good leader. What makes you a good leader is the experience of actually going out there and being a leader. And so I try to use personal experiences, good and bad, of things I've done that worked or didn't work, and the consequences for those or the benefits of those. And hopefully that's enough to get somebody who's kind of sitting on the fence and doesn't want to listen, to maybe it perks their ears a little bit and they start to listen.
No, that's a wonderful way. Storytelling, the power of storytelling, the power of saying, okay, I went this way one time and here's what happened. I try to do the same thing, right? We're in the same, business in sense. and just here's how I tried it. It didn't work. Here's how I tried it another time and it did work. And it's a
Right.
constant evolution of taking in information and different opinions. So what about that? When you were training leaders, and not directly, but you were, creating an example for leaders in your charge back when you were leading for those 23 years in the military, how did you tell them to develop themselves on their own time, not just in the formal setting, but in their own time? And how do you do that now as well, getting people to understand the
Right.
value of continuous learning?
Yeah. So I think there's a couple things I always emphasize when I go out and talk. I said, number one, you must, in your organization, if you're the leader of your organization, I don't care how big it is or how small it is, you must have a professional development plan. Not only for yourself, that's huge. I don't care how high up you get, you still have to have a professional development plan for yourself because you can always continue to learn. But especially for the young people in your organization or the people in your organization who may not even be in a leadership position right now, but they aspire to be a leader. You have to have a path for them to get into that leadership role. Because and I always use sports, and you understand sports very well. I always use sports as an example. You look out there at all the very, very successful franchises, and I don't pick whatever sport you want. I don't care, baseball, basketball, soccer, whatever. The most successful year after year after year, those ones that are historically successful, they grow their people from inside their organization, whether it's a farm team, draft picks, whatever, and they build it inside. Now, that doesn't mean every once in a while you don't go out and get somebody new that got that, but the majority of them are grown inside. If you don't have a professional development program that allows that to happen in your organization, I promise you two things are going to happen. Number one, you're going to have people who leave because if you can't provide that for them, they'll go somewhere that can. And number two is you'll end up bringing in people outside your organization who don't have the culture that you have established inside your organization. And then you got to start all over again, developing culture at a higher level instead of at the beginning level when they come in. And that's going to be a lot harder than establishing and keeping that culture as people grow in your organization.
There is so much wisdom there. Professional development. Okay. So what is the other side of that? So let's start with the first side. It, like you just said, if you do have a strong professional development program in place at your organization, it will improve retention, it will improve culture, and it will improve, probably most likely and obviously, productivity, whatever that business
and the
is,
leadership. You'll have
and
people
the
who want
leadership.
to be leaders.
Wonderful. So that's a funnel of leadership, continuous leadership. What's the other side of that equation? So for folks out there listening or running a small company, a medium company, a sports franchise, I don't know, a retailer, a giant retailer, and they do not have what they deem as being a successful professional development program, what is probably going on in their organization?
I think they have a huge turnover. I think they have low morale because people don't see a path to advance in that company. But most people have an ambition to move up in life and to want to be a little bit more than they are today. And you got to provide that path for them, because if you don't, somebody else is going to, and they're going to leave. So you're going to have high turnover, probably. You're going to have low morale, and you're going to have, here's the key, in my opinion. People won't want to step up and take charge. I tell people all the time, look, if somebody's not in charge, somebody needs to step up and take charge. Even if you're not a leader by definition, by title, whatever, if somebody needs to be in charge and nobody is, you need to step up and be in charge. I tell these young lieutenants that we produce every year from ROTC, I tell them, never, ever, ever turn down a chance to be in a leadership position. That's how you get better at it. I can bring 1,000 leadership experts, and I hate that word, experts in here, and tell you everything there is to know about leadership, and it means nothing until you actually go out and do it. Never turn down a chance to be a leader. I want to be a leader all the time. Now, I know when I come home and I walk inside my house, I know I'm not the leader anymore. I know my place. That's the reason I'm happily married for 37 years. But when I walk out the next day, I want to be the leader again.
It's because you have a general love and appreciation for developing human beings. Is that
and
accurate?
taking care of them. Absolutely. I think that's one of the number one jobs of a leader, is to take care of the people that you are in charge of. And taking care of them doesn't mean let them do whatever they want to do. Sometimes taking care of them means you're doing things, making them do things that they hate, that they don't want to do, at least right then. Eventually down the road, when they have to use what you've just taught them or made them learn, then they finally figure it out. And in the Army, I had this, I used to tell my guys, look, this is what we have to accomplish today. If we accomplished it at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I had no problems letting them go. Now, stay by your phone or whatever. So if I need you, I can find you. But hey, we accomplished what we were supposed to accomplish. If it took us till 10 o'clock at night to accomplish that mission, then we stayed there till 10 o'clock at night. Taking care of them is making sure they can do what it is they need to do. So I think that's one of the number one responsibilities of a leader, is to take care of the people that they have the privilege to lead.
Could not agree with you more. Care and caring are powerful, right?
Yes.
So let's look at this, Oak. There are also individuals. So in the military or in corporate America or business in general, right? You have people that index highly in their individual skill set. And I talk to leaders about this all the time. And they're great. I always say graphic designers or accountants or sales folks. And they're so good that the company wants to keep them, and that's great for the company, and the retention, that's wonderful. So they promote them, and then now all of a sudden they're overseeing 4 or 5 people who do what they just did.
Right.
But they don't necessarily want to lead. Or
they don't have the talents.
Or they don't have,
because you haven't professionally developed them through a program.
Correct. But even if and then let's just be real devil's advocate and go deep into this. Even if they have had professional development and they still don't, for lack of a better term, jive with caring for people. And that's not a commentary on their character. They're just, all of us are wired differently, and we have appreciation for that. So what about those folks, though? How do you take care of individual contributors that aren't necessarily leaders? And that's a tough one for companies. Let's be honest, because you want to reward them, give them financial reward, or however they see being taken care of. How do you do that? That's a tough, fine line, Oak. And I know I'm putting you on the spot, but you can handle it.
Yeah. So I think, there's more than one way to reward people for good performance. You certainly, promotion is one of those. Pay raise is one of those. Time off is one of those. Awards, and usually, in my experience, certainly in the civilian world, award without some kind of compensation, either time off or pay, doesn't mean a whole lot. So even if you don't give them a pay raise, you might give them a one-time award, that year of $1,000. So it isn't going to be every pay period, but at least they got something. So I think, it goes back motivating people, which is another huge part of leadership. To me, it goes back to very simple things. Find their sense of purpose, because everybody wants a sense of purpose in everything they do. I don't care if it's their job, their relationship, their hobby, whatever. They want a sense of purpose. They want to feel that. So if you can find what that person's sense of purpose is, why they joined your organization in the first place, why do they do what they do, whatever that is, whether it's graphic design or whatever, then you can start to figure out what motivates them and how to motivate them, even if it isn't through a promotion, if that's not what they want. But I think here's the other part of that, Chris, is that if you know your team, if you get to know people on your team, you're going to know which one of those want to be promoted and which ones don't. And why would you promote somebody who doesn't want to be promoted? You're setting them up for failure. You're setting the people they're going to lead up for failure, and you're setting your organization up for failure.
It happens all the time. You're absolutely right.
Because people don't know their people. That leaders don't know their people.
Right.
And you have to make a conscious effort to get to know the people you lead.
Oh, just underline that, and I'm going to clip that off and send it to everybody. No, I'm joking here, but I'm not. And here's what I mean. It takes time. There's no other way around it. And it takes curiosity, natural curiosity, to look at the individual across from your desk or across from a mechanism like this, virtual or remote, you know what I'm saying? And looking at that individual, what makes this person tick? What
Yeah.
is in their soul? Why are they doing this? And once you start to understand that, you can then determine your team and how they all fit together and who's
And use their
influencing who.
strengths.
Right, right. And it goes back to the initial about understanding their why. And then
Yeah.
you can figure out how to motivate them and nurture them, not in placating to them way, but
No.
making them fulfilled when they walk into the building. It's so
Yeah.
very important.
So I had a boss, another boss who retired, a
Please.
three-star general, and he said to me, Oak, never ever turn down a chance to go get your own cup of coffee. He said, I don't care how high up in the organization you get, you always go get your own cup of coffee. He said two reasons. Number one, you show people that you're no better than they are. You got to go get your own cup of coffee just like they do. He said, but more importantly, the second reason, it gets you out of your office. Nobody wants to follow somebody who sits behind their office all day. It gets you out of your office, out where they are. And he said, if you're lucky, you got 2 or 3 different ways to get to and from the coffee pot so that you can stop along the way and talk to people. He said, and when you talk to people, this is what one of the things I picked up from that I started to do. And I tell everybody, your goal as a leader is every day go out and find one person in your organization and find out one new thing about that person. Not about work, their personal life. What's their spouse's name? What's their kid's name? What sports do their kids play? What are their hobbies? What do they like? What don't they like? Then you start to get to know people. You get to know their strengths and weaknesses and why they do what they do and what makes them happy. And you also start to build the trust in that organization because now that they understand that you actually care about them, not just about it as an employee, but as a person.
It's awesome, Oak. I love that. I love that. And I think that is such valuable advice. And just a natural love and curiosity of people goes so far. It really, really does.
It
And it
does.
makes you feel better. There's a selfish part of that. It makes you feel better when someone's smiling and enjoying talking about
Yeah.
what's important to them. It's just so gratifying. All-star round, Oak. You ready?
Yeah.
First thought, best thought. I've enjoyed this conversation very much, Oak. I've really enjoyed this. Let's keep it going. Here we go. All right, I'm going to give you the 7th. Sometimes I give the 7th question, and other times I don't. I don't really have a reason. But you're getting the 7th. Here we go. 6 questions and then a 7th for you. Here we go. All-star moments. 1, how do you deal with adversity?
Again, I think you have to figure out what went wrong and figure out how to get better. That was one of the things that my father, again, taught me is that, figure out what you didn't do as well as you could and get better at it. And so I always do that. I always say, okay, that happened. Nothing I can do about that, except I can make it better next time.
Good. 2, how do you give yourself fuel?
I fish. Family, fish, and faith. The 3 F's. That's how I energize myself.
I love it. Did you catch anything today?
I haven't gone today. I hope, we got the storm coming through here tomorrow, so I haven't been out today.
Got it. Well, be safe and careful. All right, here we go. 3, what does never give up mean to you?
It means that you have that desire to accomplish something. I used to have a guy that worked for me, and I used to call him the pit bull because he would never give up. If I gave him something, I knew it was going to get done no matter what, because he never gives up. So I think you just have that burning desire to do what it is that needs to get done, whatever it takes to do that, lawfully, morally, whatever. But you never say, well, I tried. And Hal Moore, General Hal Moore of that We Were Soldiers Once and Young movie that Mel Gibson played, he used to have a saying, and I had the honor of talking to him, hearing him talk a couple of times. And he used to have a saying that life is not like baseball. It is not 3 strikes and you're out. If you try 3 things and it doesn't work, try another one. And if that doesn't work, try another one. Keep going until you accomplish what you got to accomplish.
Awesome. 4, what is the value of collaboration?
Oh, it's huge, because now you're not only using your knowledge, your skills, your abilities, but you're using other people's as well. And a lot of times it isn't yours or theirs. lots of times in my experience is I take a little bit of my stuff and I take a little bit of your stuff and a little bit of somebody else's. And now we have a plan, a solution, an idea that comes from everybody. Two things. I've used other people's ideas, other people's talents, because I don't care what position you're in. You don't have all those things. You don't have a monopoly on all those ideas. And number two, the other thing that it now does is now it's not Colonel McCulloch's solution idea. It's our idea and our solution. Now they got skin in the game.
Nice. Hiring people. What do you look for in an ideal candidate? Now you've done some of that, right? I understand the structure of the Army is different, but hiring people, what do you look for in a candidate?
Character. 100%. They got to have, the minimum skill set, but I'll take somebody who has character and attitude, a positive attitude, over somebody who's close to the top in skills, over somebody who's way above in skills, but doesn't have the character or the attitude.
6, describe yourself as a leader in one sentence.
A servant leader.
Nice. 7, last one. What's the difference between a manager and a leader?
Yeah, that's a good one. And there's lots of people who argue that one and say there is no difference, and there is. A manager, in my opinion, is in charge of things, of warehouse, a store. They manage things. They don't lead things. Now, some managers can have some leadership skills, and most of them do, but a leader leads people, and they must have some management skills as well. But the difference is the people part. Leaders are people, managers are things. That's how I look at the difference.
Oak, this has been tremendous. I can't thank you enough. This has been a wonderful conversation. I am going to ask you again to come on at some point in the near future.
Anytime you want, Chris. This has been fantastic.
Thank you so much. Have a great day, Oak. Take care.
You too, Chris.
And we thank Oak very much for being on the show. My number one takeaway is this, and this has come up again and again: professional development, continuous learning, as Oak was saying. People understanding that to get better in leadership, or anything for that matter, but the focus today was leadership, and obviously every week on the podcast, you have to go after it. You have to understand self-leadership, as we talked about, integrity, humility, understanding these concepts and how they relate to your everyday work. And as Oak was saying, he was training and developing leaders in his role, but that is him. What are you doing? How are you helping your emerging leaders? How are you helping yourself? Are you working at this? That was the essence of our conversation. And that is why we uncovered a lot, I hope, to help you in that process. He was talking about the quality of storytelling and describing how your failures have contributed to what has gone not so well for you, and helping folks to understand their challenges. Sharing experiences is what Oak said is very valuable for putting context on leadership issues. Hope you enjoyed the conversation. For our podcast producer, Paul Salazar, I am Chris Gargano. Thank you so much, everybody, for listening each and every week. We'll see you next time on Keep the Line Moving.
We thank you for listening to Keep the Line Moving. We would love it if you subscribed or left a review. For more podcast episodes, check out our YouTube page. If you'd like to work with the Gargano Leadership Group, check out our website. This has been a GLG production, copyright 2023. For our podcast producer, Paul Salazar, and our marketing coordinator, Savin Narwal. Have a great week, everyone.